Chapters 27 and 28. Chapter 27. Digger stood up and jammed his hands in his pockets, then quickly pulled them out and dropped them at his side, but I could see his fingers curl up into nervous fists. His public defender stood beside him, lifted a legal pad full of notes, and cleared his throat. Your Honor, Michael Griswold has lived his entire life on the eastern shore of Maryland. He is one of 5 children in his family. True, I thought. He is one of 5, even though his 2 older brothers had already left home. A fair student, Michael is nevertheless a very hard worker, the lawyer continued, often helping his father, a heavy equipment operator, to haul loads of gravel and sand. His mother says he is invaluable at home, too, often taking care of his younger brother and sister, including feeding and putting them to bed when both of his parents have to work. He glanced at his notes, and I hoped he would tell everybody in court to look at Digger's chipped tooth, the one in the front that never got fixed after he broke it throwing himself on the ice to save my life. Give him some credit for that, I wished I could holler. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Digger. Michael has never been in trouble with the law before, the lawyer went on, but his father has had numerous contacts with police. I won't go into detail here, but several complaints have been made against Mr. Griswold for assaulting his wife, often with the children present. Just last month, a restraining order was issued limiting Mr. Griswold's contact with the family. My eyes shifted to Digger's dad and tried to burn a hole through the back of his thick, bald head, but he sat there like a rock. I wondered if that public defender was going to tell everybody how Mr. Griswold smacked Digger in the eye, too, the night before our Valentine dance at the middle school. None of this is any excuse for what happened to Benjamin D'Angelo, the young public defender continued, but I want the court to know that Michael has harbored a lot of resentment and anger towards his father and has never had a healthy escape valve. Never any counseling of any kind, never anyone to talk to or go to for help, except his grandfather, who has recently become frail and was placed in a nursing home. At the mention of his grandfather, Digger crossed and then uncrossed his arms. I would like to add, the attorney said, that Mr. D'Angelo, who purchased the farm belonging to Michael's grandfather, tearing down the old farmhouse before building a new home there. And while we realize this is no excuse for the terrible loss of life that has resulted, we nevertheless ask the court to keep that all in mind. Truly, it was a practical joke gone bad. The public defender stood back and indicated Digger's mom. Mrs. Sue Lorraine Griswold would now like to address the court. Mrs. Griswold, her stringy, gray-streaked hair falling halfway down her back, stood up and tugged at a snug blouse over her wide hips. I've always liked Digger's mom. She had a rough life, I know, but she loved telling jokes and teasing the kids when I was around. Sometimes she laughed so hard her eyes would tear up, and I admired her toughness. Maybe she wasn't tough enough to whip Mr. Griswold, but she could drive a dump truck and operate a bulldozer as good as any man. I know I have to keep it short, Digger's mom started, but I want to tell you, my son here, he's a good boy in his heart. He's always obeyed his parents, and he means the world to Hank and Leanne, his little brother and sister. It's true, he does get fiery temper at times, runs in the family, I guess. Anyway, I can promise you this, that if and when my boy comes home, we will, the children and I, have moved permanent to my sister's over in Denton. She's got a pretty big house on Pelicker Road, and Digger, that's Michael, Your Honor, he'd go to school there, in Kent County, because I want to give him a fresh start. She hung her head for a second and then said, That's all, and I thank you very much for your time, Your Honor. While she sat down, I watched Mr. Griswold, but he didn't move or even look at his wife. After that, both JT and Digger had a chance to speak for themselves. JT was first in a voice just loud enough for us to hear. I'm real sorry for what happened to Ben and his family. I wrote the D'Angelos a letter. I told them if I could turn back time, I would have been there, down at their dock that day. Honestly, I'd never meant to hurt Ben or his family. But I know that because of what we did, we hurt them and a lot of other people. I am truly sorry. I know I will always answer to the Lord for this. It is something I will always carry with me. When JT sat down, his lawyer touched him on the shoulder. Digger scraped his chair back and stood. I want to say I'm sorry too, he began. I've had a long time to think about what we done, and I want your honor to know that I'm the only one here who should be blamed. Like my mom said, I get a fiery temper sometimes, and I was pretty angry at Mr. D'Angelo for ripping down my grandpa's house and moving in there, taking away all the things in my life that I love so much. I know it wasn't Mr. D'Angelo's fault. I was just lashing out. The way my dad lashes out at me, I guess. Digger paused a moment, and I wondered if he was going to go on. Anyway, so I told JT, Digger continued, that if he didn't come with me to steal the drill and that glue, that the next time Curtis tried to punch him out of school, I wasn't going to be there to stop it. Suddenly, Digger was turning, his eyes scanning the courtroom until he saw me. I also want everyone in here to know that my friend, Brady Parks, he's sitting there in the back, that Brady should in no way get blamed or looked down on for what happened. I don't hold nothing against you, Brady, and I'm sorry I lied to you. We was best friends growing up and, well, you were right about no one ever forgetting. That one day in the field after school, you asked how I'd feel if it was Hank or Leanne in the kayak. I sat up tall and nodded so he could see that I remembered. Digger wiped out one eye and turned to his mother. I don't want nothing bad to ever happen to the kids, Mom. I'm so sorry for all I done to mess things up. Mrs. Griswold started crying, and when Digger did too, I couldn't watch any longer. My head bowed. I listened to him plead with Master Williams. Please don't punish JT the same as me, Your Honor. I brung a lot of shame on him, but I'm the only one in this room that is here to blame. When he finished and sat down, several minutes of silence followed. I felt as though my whole life was on hold right then. I kept looking from the back of JT to the back of Digger, and smack out of the blue an oxymoron came to my head. Alone together. That's what we were, together in this room, with all these people, and I had never felt more alone. All this time Master Williams was busy writing in different folders in her desk. When she finished, she took off her glasses. Please stand, the bailiff said quietly. JT and Digger stood. I knew this was the moment. I felt myself leaning forward with my hands gripping my knees, bracing myself for what she would decide. She started off slowly. Mr. Tyler, Mr. Griswold, I appreciate your apologies and all of your heartfelt comments. I know that you have apologized, and I know that you have both said that you didn't mean to kill anyone. She paused a second before continuing. But I'm afraid that in this case, apologies are not enough. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mom fold her hands in her lap, and Dad leaned forward beside me. What you boys did is like firing a gun into a crowded movie theater just to scare somebody. Only somebody got killed. Master Williams focused intently on my friends as she explained this. Mr. Griswold, you've admitted this was all your idea and that you threatened your friend, Mr. Tyler, compelling him into committing the act with you. She turned to JT. But Mr. Tyler, I didn't see any evidence here of physical force. You are not a puppet. You could have said no. You could have walked away. You didn't. And then you did nothing to stop Mr. Griswold. In fact, it's my understanding that you helped steal that drill and the glue, and that you stood guard while Mr. Griswold destroyed property belonging to the D'Angelos, thereby setting the stage for the horrendous acts that followed. Let this be a lesson to you, Mr. Tyler, she said, that just because you don't actively participate in a crime, you're not off the hook. No, you're both to blame for what happened to that little boy. JT's mom put a hand up to her mouth. This offense is so serious that there have to be consequences, Master Williams continued, her voice growing harsher. Look around you. Look at your mothers. Look at the pain you have caused these families, not to mention the pain and enormous loss the D'Angelos have suffered. The most important thing you boys need to learn is that what you did was so reckless and so unthinking that the little boy lost his life. One little boy won't grow up to go to school or ever have a job or a family of his own because of what you did. She paused again. Now that kind of behavior cannot and will not go unpunished in the state of Maryland. You need to know this, and you need to know this for the rest of your life. When she finished, she leaned back but continued staring at Digger and JT for a moment. Then she put her glasses back on and busily wrote on the papers in front of her. Both JT and Digger looked whipped and stood limply with their heads hanging. It killed me to watch, but I couldn't turn away either. Not then. A couple more minutes went by. Maybe it wasn't even that long. When Master Williams spoke again, the words came fast. There was some legal jargon, but I grasped this. She committed JT and Digger to the custody of juvenile services, to 9 months in a forester camp for juvenile offenders out in western Maryland. At the end of 9 months, I'll review your records, she warned. If I think you haven't learned anything, I will not hesitate to keep both of you there for another couple of years. 9 months. Well, I was relieved to tell the truth. 9 months is a whole lot better than hearing until you're 21. 9 months was a school year. By summer, I thought, they could both be home. They could be back in school for sophomore year, well, or freshman year if they had to repeat. It's not too bad, Mom said to me. No, I agree. Everyone was talking in hushed voices, and I began to think that forestry camp had to be better than some juvenile jail place, too. They're lucky, Dad noted. Darn lucky, Carl added. But the next thing we knew, the two sheriff's deputies who had stood quietly at the sides of the room all morning were putting handcuffs on my two friends. JT's mother wasn't even allowed to hug him goodbye. The deputy shook his head and gently pushed her arm away, even though she was reaching out and calling his name. Hey, wait! I started. Mom and Dad grabbed my elbows and rushed me out of the hallway, into the hallway just then. They got me a drink from the water cooler, and I didn't realize until I took my cup that my hands were shaking. Chapter 28. A for sale sign appeared in the end of the D'Angelo's driveway a few days later. We'd already heard that they moved out. At least they were together, I thought. They were living in Virginia, someone told Mom at work. She also found out that Mrs. D'Angelo would have a baby girl in December. I still ride my bike to their place once in a while. You can't see the house from the road, of course, but I met a real estate guy coming out of the driveway one day in a black BMW. He stopped to put his window down and say hi. So I asked him if he had a buyer yet, and he said no. So I asked him how the garden was doing. The one by the pool with the rocks and everything. He smirked. No garden there anymore. I had a terrible vision then of Mrs. D'Angelo angrily ripping up the butterfly bush and the flowers I planted and heaving them over the fence. She took it with her, he laughed. Dug up all those plants, the big purple one, the stones, everything. She did? I guess my mouth hung open after I asked the question. Weird, huh? The guy asked me. I mean, why not just plant another one? I'll tell you, I see a lot of strange things, but no, I stopped him. It's not weird. See, it was a butterfly garden. Last spring we planted it. I should have known he wouldn't understand. But before I even had a chance to explain, the guy was buzzing his window up. Like I said earlier, it's fall now and high school has started. I do my homework and dribble the basketball around. I walk over to the river's edge with Tilly. In fact, it's on my way there, and I just recently noticed how the path JT and I had tramped down through a soybean field was mostly grown in now. And yet you could still see it, a narrow sandy line between my house and his. I think a lot about JT and Digger. I wonder if they're actually cutting down trees and sleeping in tents at that forestry camp. I wonder if it's cold at night and whether the bugs are bad, and what the food is like and how much they've changed. I don't suppose I'll ever hear from them again, but Mom says otherwise. Maybe. One day after school, over at Food Line in Centralville, I ran into Kate. She said that JT was going to write to me. She said he was doing okay, that her dad was still waiting for a new kidney, but that her mom had hired some help on the farm. Kate's hair was up in little braids that were tied with green and white ribbons, my old middle school colors. She had a field hockey uniform on and a bag of hamburger rolls in her hand. I wanted to ask her more, but Kate said, well, she probably ought to get going. I said, me too. She looked back, though. When Kate walked off, she looked back. Dad's still crabbing, but only every other day. Been a bumper crop of crabs these past couple weeks, but it's only because the crabs are on the move now before winter sets in. Dad lined himself up a good bit of carpentry work for the winter and started on it early. Still, he says he'll haul those crab pots again in the spring. I can only hope that I will too. Evenings, Dad and I are building us a boat, a little day sailor. We drew up the plans on the kitchen table, and hammered the frames together and laid in the keel last night. When it's done, we're going to name it for my mother. She doesn't know it yet. We'll either call it the Misty or the Misty Light. I don't know. Probably not the latter. Dad said that made her sound like a movie star or something. He really had me laughing over that one. I'm sure it'll take us all winter to finish the project, but I look forward to the day we catch our first breeze and go sailing down in the Corsica. With any luck, I bet we could set sail that little boat all the way down to Queenstown and back in one afternoon. The